joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. It is a big day in Israel. Voters are heading to the polls for the country's parliamentary election after a heated 3-month campaign. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu cast his ballot this morning, and he made a last-minute pledge to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state.
In order to prevent the left-wing parties from governing, there's just one thing that needs to be done: to close the gap between Likud and Labour and to vote for Likud.
Meanwhile, his opponent, Isaac Herzog, led by the Zionist Union, says if he's elected, he would push for peace talks with Iran.
No Israeli leader will ever accept a nuclear Iran. However, the way to deal with it, that's where I beg to differ with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I believe in open, frank discussions with the U.S. administration.
Earlier this month in Washington, Netanyahu met with the United States Congress calling for more sanctions on Iran. Netanyahu is seeking his 4th term as prime minister. It could be weeks before a new government is formed. And we'll have the results of the election online tonight, including coverage from our Jerusalem bureau. So be sure to check that out. It's at cbnnews.com. Tensions between Russia and Europe are rising again as both sides deploy thousands of troops in military exercises. The deployments come as Russia celebrates the 1-year anniversary of its takeover of the Crimean Peninsula. George Thomas has the details.
Crimeans are marking the first anniversary of Russia's annexation.
I'm very happy, and my heart is as sunny as the fine day today. We finally got our own place in the country where we were born and where we are looking forward to living.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin admitted for the very first time last week that he ordered the takeover of the strategic peninsula and was ready to place his country's nuclear forces on alert just in case. CBN News was in the Crimean capital the day Russian troops stormed the city. The drama unfolding here outside the Crimean parliament comes at a very tenuous time here for the folks in southern Ukraine. A year later, Western leaders still refuse to recognize Russia's land grab in Crimea, calling it an occupation.
Exactly 1 year ago, an illegitimate referendum was held on Crimea, a referendum which Russia subsequently used as a pretext for annexation of Crimea that was not according to international law.
The U.S. State Department says sanctions on Russia will continue until Crimea is returned to Ukraine. The Russians say that will never happen, calling Crimea their historical homeland. Meanwhile, just off the coast of Crimea, NATO forces from 6 countries, including the United States, are taking part in joint naval exercises. The deployment is meant to reassure Baltic states increasingly worried about Russia's next move following the annexation of Crimea. Not to be outdone, the Russians countered by putting its northern fleet in the Arctic on full alert and launching its own military exercise involving some 45,000 forces as well as warplanes and submarines. Putin says he plans to spend more than $350 billion to overhaul Russia's fighting forces. Back in Crimea, despite the celebratory atmosphere around the 1-year anniversary, the economy on the peninsula has taken a hit. Pressure from the weak ruble and Western sanctions have put a damper on many businesses.
Last year, we made a complete loss as the rent rose and customer purchasing power was not as strong as before.
Despite the international isolation and economic sanctions, many pro-Russian locals remain defiant.
Our faith has not been shattered in the past year, so we have nothing to regret, nothing. Our choice was right. We achieved what we wished for.
George Thomas, CBN News.
In Pakistan Monday, thousands of Christians blocked streets in several cities to protest attacks against 2 of their churches over the weekend. The Christians are calling on the government to crack down on Islamic extremists and to do more to protect churches and other minority faiths. Protesters shut down traffic and public transportation in parts of 3 cities in the east. In Lahore, police fired tear gas into the crowds after demonstrators attacked several officers. Sunday, Taliban suicide bombers blew themselves up outside 2 Lahore churches, killing 17 people and wounding at least 70 others.
People who are praying, people in church, defenseless people were attacked, which is a crime. and that's what we are protesting. We are asking the government for protection, for security, and to allow us to pray in peace.
Pakistan is a Muslim nation, and Christians account for less than 3% of the population. A family business in Denver has won a big victory in their legal battle against the birth control mandate in Obamacare. A federal district court has just exempted Hercules Industries from the mandate. The owners of that company previously told CBN News they should not have to provide coverage for drugs that induce abortion because it violates their religious freedom.
They said in the court case that Hercules gave up our right for religious freedom when we made the free choice to enter the marketplace of commerce. We're given the choice to comply with the mandate or give up our business.
The family's lawyer from the Alliance Defending Freedom explains the mandate violates the religious rights of many Americans.
It's none of the government's business whether you're a Christian serving the community in a nonprofit, whether you're a church, whether you're a Christian trying to follow the Lord in your Monday through Friday workday. It's none of the government's business to tell you that your faith needs to be violated.
Other Obamacare mandate cases are still working their way through the court system. Arizona judges who perform weddings cannot refuse to perform ceremonies for same-sex couples. A state committee on judiciary ethics says turning away gay couples would violate rules against bias or prejudice. The committee also said that a judge's religious beliefs about the definition of marriage are not a valid reason to refuse to perform a ceremony. Gay marriage became legal in Arizona back in October. The man accused of firing the gunshots that injured 2 police officers in Ferguson, Missouri, now says he was abused during his arrest. Jeffrey Williams' attorney says his client was subjected to excessive force. He alleges that Williams sustained bruises to his back, shoulders, face, and a knot on his head. St. Louis County Police call the allegations completely false. Williams also maintains he was not aiming for the officers who were shot in this incident. Leaders of the faith community and area law enforcement in Hampton Roads are coming together to push for racial reconciliation. The Building Bridges event was hosted over the weekend by Kingdom World Outreach Center in Virginia Beach, Virginia. It was sponsored in light of national incidents involving police shootings. Officer Chris Mitchell shared why the church's involvement is key to healing tensions between police officers and the community.
The church has a duty, as far as I'm concerned, to be participating within the community to make a difference within the community. If we remain silent, who will be the voice? We've got to speak up and to speak out and to reach out instead of just reaching in to try and make a difference in our community. A lot of these children, a lot of these young people, they just need a positive influence, and what better place to give them a positive influence than in the church?
The event also offered practical solutions to help ease unrest between police and the public. Coming up, April 15th is just 4 weeks away, but no worries, we've got a tax expert to help you audit-proof your return and show you how to win if the IRS comes knocking. Many Americans live in fear of an IRS audit, even if they've done everything right on their taxes. Tax expert Dan Pilla says you don't have to live in fear because you can make your tax return audit-proof. Take a look.
Tax filing season can trigger anxiety for any taxpayer, regardless of income and no matter how honest and careful they are when preparing their returns. Some taxpayers intentionally pay higher taxes and avoid taking deductions they know they're entitled to just because they fear the prying eyes of the IRS. And when the dreaded audit happens, the experience can be both emotionally and financially draining. But tax expert Dan Pilla says you never have to fear the IRS again. In his book, How to Win Your Tax Audit, he offers proven strategies for audit-proofing your tax return and coming out on top of an audit if the IRS comes knocking on your door.
It's tax season, and maybe you've already prepared your taxes. Maybe you're putting them off. Either way, the threat of an audit is something we all should be prepared for. Joining me now to help you prepare for anything the IRS throws your way is Dan Pilla, tax expert and author of the book, How to Win Your Audit. Dan, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, in your book, you talk about something called an economic reality audit. We sent our videographer out to see how many people are familiar with that term. Let's take a listen.
Sure.
Do you know what an economic reality audit is? Have you ever heard of that concept?
No, I haven't.
Economic reality audit. Can't say that I have. I could probably say that I would guess, but I would hate to guess and guess wrong. But I have never, economic reality audit, I have never heard of that, no.
So do you think those two answers are typical of most people? And can you explain exactly what an economic reality audit is?
Well, as to the answers, let's hope the answer is because they haven't been audited and they haven't experienced it. But the fact of the matter is that just about anybody that's gone through an audit is going to experience this aspect of what the IRS is focusing on today, which they haven't done in the past, at least not to this extent. Now, economic reality means very simply the IRS is looking at your tax return, not just from the standpoint of verification. You know, if you claim $5,000 in mortgage interest or charitable contributions, normally the IRS would ask you, okay, prove that. Now what they're asking is the question, do you have the economic capacity to have given that money in the first place? So it's not just a question of did you make the contribution?
Wow.
Do you have the capacity to have made the contribution in the first place? And so what the IRS is doing is more of an investigative audit now, looking at your background, your educational background, your cultural background, your home, your furniture, your fixtures, the type of business that you're in, the trips and vacations you take. In other words, a full picture of your economic substance to answer the question, does this person have the capacity to pay these expenses?
Wow.
And what they're doing is they're finding ways to add unreported income to your tax return as saying, well, you know, your lifestyle indicates that you must be making more money than you're reporting on your tax return. And so we're just going to add more income to your tax return.
Wow. Reading the headlines, we've been reading that the IRS is auditing less because of staffing issues. You say that's not necessarily true.
No, it's not accurate at all. As a matter of fact, the face-to-face audits, which we typically think of a tax audit as a face-to-face situation where you bring your shoebox or your grocery bags full of records down to the IRS office and you sit there and you go through all of this stuff, right? But that's really the smallest and has been for really decades, the smallest segment of audits that the IRS does. The broader segment is computerized audits, where the IRS uses its computer systems to audit your tax returns, and they do that for virtually every tax return that's filed. So it's obviously more efficient for the IRS to use computers than it is in a face-to-face environment, and that's where the focus is.
Okay. How often do you think the IRS is incorrect or has incorrect information that could lead to an audit?
Well, I'll tell you what, in my book, How to Win Your Tax Audit, I talk extensively about the audit process, how the IRS selects returns for audit, the process that it goes through. And what I show you, what I document in the book from the IRS's own statistics, is that their audit results are wrong between 60 to 90% of the time. So more than 60 to 90% of the time. So more than 50% of the people that go through an audit end up with a determination that's just flat wrong.
Wow. Many taxpayers deliberately avoid taking deductions because that they're entitled to, because they're afraid of triggering an audit. I know when I sit down with my tax preparer, I'm amazed at some of the things you can deduct, and they make me a little nervous.
Sure, that's right, and it's a very common experience, and most people have given up on deductions entirely. Almost 71% of all the tax returns that are filed now are short forms. People aren't claiming any deductions, and that's one of the key reasons why. They think, well, I'm going to paint a target on my chest if I claim this tax deduction, which is absolutely wrong. What I teach you in the book is how to actually audit-proof your tax return so that you can claim the deductions you're allowed to claim. You reduce your tax liability to its lowest legal level. You do it without risk.
All right. We certainly cannot get into every single issue, but you've got the answers here. How to win your tax audit. Dan Pilla, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Up next, what percentage of married couples actually make it? You may be shocked by the good news. We'll bust some marriage myths right after this.
Hi, everybody. Lori Johnson here, CBN's health reporter.
Well, now that spring has almost sprung, think about walking barefoot outside. It's actually really good for you because it reduces damaging inflammation. As it turns out, the earth is full of negatively charged electrons that seep through our bare skin. And that's a good thing because they neutralize the positively charged free radicals in our body. Free radicals are bad and come from things like pollution and trans fats. To learn more about this, check out my Healthy Living blog on cbnnews.com.
Everyone knows half of all marriages end in divorce. There's just one problem. That is not true. Paul Strand looks at the myths of divorce and the reality of successful marriages in America.
Harvard-trained researcher Shanti Feldhahn works with her husband Jeff to help people with their marriages and relationships. At one point, this Atlanta-based couple believed and shared information that most marriages are unhappy, and 50% of them end in divorce, even in the church.
I didn't know. I've stood up on stage and said every one of these wrong statistics.
Then 8 years ago, Shanti asked her assistant for specific research on divorce for an article she was writing. Neither of them could find any real numbers, and that kicked off a personal and long crusade to find the truth. And it was a revelation, as she reveals in her book, The Good News About Marriage.
First-time marriages, probably about 20 to 25% have ended in divorce on average. Now, okay, that's still too high, right? But it's a whole lot better than what people think it is.
Shanti and Jeff point out the 50% figure came from projections of what researchers thought the divorce rate would become.
But the divorce rate has been dropping. We've never hit those numbers. We've never gotten close.
So imagine the implications of this. Half of marriages do not end in divorce. They never have. So the chances of yours making it aren't a measly 50-50. They're more like 70, 75, 80%. That can give couples a lot of hope. And hope is often the fuel a marriage needs to survive and even thrive. Shanti says hopelessness itself can actually lead to divorce.
That sense of futility itself pulls down marriages. And the problem is we have this culture-wide feeling of futility about marriage.
Christian psychotherapist Angel Davis agrees.
The Bible says hope deferred, it makes our heart sick. And we are so influenced by numbers and by culture.
And it's based on all these discouraging beliefs that many of them just aren't true.
Jeff Feldhahn says anytime he tells people about his wife's findings, they're stunned.
Their mouth drops open and they're just shocked because they go, I can't believe I believed this all these years. And I've heard it so many times. And I've heard it from the pulpit so many times.
This is a great chance to stand up and say, we were all fooled, not anymore.
To that end, Shanti's been working to spread this news to pastors and other leaders as fast as she can. It totally changed Virginia pastor Daniel Floyd's counseling because he had bought into fictional research.
I told her, I said, I've said this, I've taught this.
He's sure it will change a generation of marriage counseling.
I think it's significant and could change the conversation from one that is, wow, it's just the way it is, and half of you are going to make it, half of you are not, and change the conversation to know historically, overwhelming majority have made it, and you can make it.
We know in psychology that what you believe affects how you feel, and then it leads to actions. So when other people are accomplishing something we think is hopeless, it gives us hope. And then we start feeling different and then start acting different.
Shanti says a majority of us believe only about 30% of marriages are happy.
Most people think most marriages are just kind of just kind of rolling along. And they're shocked when I tell them that the actual average is 80%. 80% of marriages are happy.
Not knowing that often leads couples to avoid marriage and just shack up instead.
Like, if I'm just going to get divorced and I'm not going to be happy, why bother getting married, right? And it's based on a lie. That feeling is based on a lie.
Pastor Floyd says these new facts can be a game changer.
I think really helps people in the challenging moments to say, if I'll just stick with it, then there's a good chance I'm going to make it the distance.
With hope, you feel that you can make it through, even though you're in a tough patch.
And Shanti agrees the numbers prove most of the unhappily married can turn it around.
The studies show that if they stay married for 5 years, that almost 80% of those will be happy 5 years later.
The good news about marriage reveals more, like the fact the divorce rate among those active in their church is 27 to 50% lower than among non-churchgoers. Shanti's hope is that once people learn the truth, that they will spread it far and wide.
We need to change the paradigm. of how we think and talk about marriage, from marriage being in trouble and all this discouraging stuff to saying, no, wait, most marriages are strong and happy for a lifetime. That makes a total difference to a couple's feeling that, you know what, most people get through this and we can too.
Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Atlanta.
Operation Blessing is helping end poverty in communities in El Salvador through vocational training. Teams have developed programs for vulnerable communities, especially for single mothers and young people lacking proper education. They're teaching them how to make handmade hammocks. It is the first step toward helping them establish their very own small business and provide an income to rise out of poverty. Operation Blessing will continue to support these business initiatives with training in marketing and savings. You can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to its website. It's ob.org. And finally, we want to leave you today with a message you can tweet, post, tag, and share this Tuesday. It's a thought from my heart to yours that I hope will inspire you and others. Remember this: there are two choices at the heart of any difficult decision. One is driven by fear. The other is driven by love. And that road usually demands faith. So put faith to your faith this day and get to work choosing to love. Be blessed. That is going to do it now for CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. Want to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today? You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. That's going to do it this time. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a terrific Tuesday, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.